right, good morning, J Street. And thank you to Ben and Tiffany for being here today. Here's my first question. So, heading into the midterm elections, so many of us in this room and online were deeply worried about the threat posed by right-wing extremists who seek to undermine the integrity of our elections, suppress voting rights, illegally gerrymander our electoral maps, and otherwise interfere and threaten the functioning of our democracy. As leaders working to help confront these threats, what do you think worked on Election Day and in the lead up? What are the key successes that the pro-democracy movement can point to? And Tiffany, I'm going to start with you.
Wonderful. Well, first, thank you so much for having me here today. Our partnership with J Street throughout the years has been really critical to defending democracy and helping elect champions across the country who will fight for our democratic values, both at the federal and state level. And Tali, thank you so much. It's an honor to be here with you and Ben. So look, we had a good night on election night, right? Yes, exactly. We should keep applauding that. I think this feeling we're all having is hope, and it's great. And in the 3 months leading up to the election, I traveled all over the country, 27,000 miles campaigning with 53 candidates, and got to see firsthand how concerned voters were on the ground about protecting our democracy. And that played out at the ballot box, right? From the clean sweep in our battleground Secretary of State and Attorneys General races, where we defeated election deniers across the country, to flipping a Senate seat in Pennsylvania, to defending important incumbent governors across the country, including in Wisconsin. We even flipped state legislatures across the country in a midterm, which is pretty unheard of. And that's because voters cared about democracy. We would go around and we would say, democracy is on the ballot. And there were a lot of folks who frankly were a little skeptical about whether or not voters cared enough about that to have that influence their vote in the ballot box. And the voters proved them wrong, right? Voters showed that democracy was front and center in their mind when they walked into that ballot box. And that's great. We can continue to build on that. We have to continue to build on that, because some of those threats that we were talking about in 2022 are still there, right? We have still seen in the past 2 years 80 voter suppression bills go into effect that absolutely impacted Black and brown communities' turnout in 2022. We know that these are the most fair maps we've seen in 70 years in the House, and yet Republicans are still starting with a gerrymandered disadvantage that allowed them to hold the House majority when frankly we should have been able to win it. So we're gonna have to continue to fight the corruption of dark money, the gerrymandered maps, the voter suppression, and the attacks on our democracy. So our work here as a community isn't done, but we also know that we have done a great job in making sure that voters understand the urgency of the moment that we are in. And one last thing, Tali, is that we actually just got our post-election survey back, and we asked voters, was this election more or less important than others in your lifetime? And 2/3 of them said more important. And when asked why, just open-ended, why was this election more important? The vast majority of them said democracy first. So that really was playing out across the country.
Ben, do you want to speak a little bit about the key successes of the pro-democracy movement?
Absolutely. And thank you so much, Tali. Thank you, Tiffany, for your amazing, amazing work. It's an honor to be on the panel with you. And thanks to Jeremy and the whole J Street community. The work of J Street to build and support democracy and peace and justice in Israel is interlinked inextricably with the work to ensure we have a democracy in the United States. And I'm proud to have been an enthusiastic J Street supporter since in different capacities at Move On and other roles through the years. But when I moved home to Wisconsin to join the fight for democracy in my home state, it has been extraordinary to me to see how J Street works in strategic races and strategic places across the country. It's a critical part of the infrastructure of preserving and expanding the idea of American democracy here. So thank you. And I want to just zero in on Wisconsin. This was a state that's been the tipping point in both of the last 2 presidential elections. We were the state that, put Trump over the top, and then put Biden over the top by 0.6 percentage point. And Wisconsin, it's an iron rule that the party of the president loses the midterms. The last time a Democratic governor candidate won in Wisconsin when there was a Democratic president in the White House was 60 years ago. In 1962, JFK's approval rating when they got to election day was 70%, and the Democratic candidate for governor won by 1 point that year. So we went in thinking, it's worth a shot. We wanted to do everything we possibly could. We have Governor Tony Evers, who's a great and decent governor. And then Republicans in our state Supreme Court actually basically overrode the governor's veto and chose the most extreme gerrymandered map in the United States of America in our state legislature. So Republicans were on track to get 2/3 supermajorities in both chambers of our state legislature. And their united goal, both the Republican Trump-endorsed candidate Tim Michels for governor and the Republicans running in state legislature, was to scrap our bipartisan election administration system, put partisans in charge, and be able to rewrite the rules so that, as the Republican candidate said on the campaign trail in the final weeks, after he was elected governor, no Republican would ever lose again. And it wasn't clear if we'd be able to stop them. And there was an enormous effort by so many people. We broke our own records for organizing in a midterm. Every ally, the work of J Street members, the whole J Street organization, and so many others, labor, grassroots groups, young voters, we defied history. We won the governor's race by 3.4 percentage points. In the state legislature, Republicans came within less than 0.1% of the votes cast, 2,499 votes in the right districts. Republicans would have gotten dual chamber supermajorities, but we stopped them there too. And in our Senate race, which people had thought was totally out of reach, we had the great J Street endorsed candidate Mandela Barnes running for Senate. He is a champion. He just turned 36. In Wisconsin, also no Democrat had beaten an incumbent Republican senator in a midterm with a Democratic president since that 1962 election. And on election night, the New York Times said he was going to lose by 3.9 points with their needle. And after being outspent by $27 million, he lost by 26,000 votes. So he demonstrated the power of this movement, even when all the political science and the projections say it's impossible. And we saw this in Arizona, we saw this in Pennsylvania, we saw this in Michigan, we saw this in enough states that Trump's coup plan won't work this time. He will not have the power to overturn the election results in 2024. And that is a giant, giant triumph in a moment of extreme peril that everyone here played a role in making possible.
Thank you. And we obviously touched on this already. The results in the midterms were better than a lot of us expected, thankfully, and thanks to the work that everyone in this room and on this stage was doing. And we talked about this already, but I'd love to hear specifically what messages you think resonated with voters on the issue of democracy. I know you talked a little bit about democracy being on the ballot, but coming from a fierce battleground state, Ben, do you want to sort of hammer in on what messages resonated most with voters?
Absolutely. So our governor, his core attribute as a candidate is that he does the right thing. So actually the governor's campaign chose the message doing the right thing for Wisconsin, and we contrasted that with the radical, divisive extremism of Tim Michels. And what we found in both the Senate and the governor's race is that democracy was actually a key proof point for a broader message about the character of the candidates. They say it's not what the candidates say about the issues, it's what the issues say about the candidates. And the Republicans, Ron Johnson was part of the fake elector scheme. He tried to hand fake electors to Mike Pence on the floor of the Senate on January 6th. In our governor's race, the Republican supported our complete ban on abortion that was passed in 1849. It was supposed to be a distant memory, but is now under litigation. Our great Attorney General Josh Kaul is suing to strike down that ban. So we had an argument that was essentially, these Republicans are against democracy. They want the power to overturn elections. They want to rip away your freedom to make your own decisions about your own body. and they're out for their own power and not for you. It's like, whose side are you on? And our candidates were on the side of regular people, and that worked. And as you said, there were all these people saying, no, we should just talk about inflation. Well, inflation, the economy, they were part of this message, but it did, the idea of democracy helped illustrate that these are people that were not on the side of the voters. And ultimately, voters want to have someone who will be their champion. Democracy is a core part of that. And that message worked up and down the ballot. I'm so glad so many people decided to lean in on it, despite what the chattering classes were saying.
Great. Tiffany, what?
Yeah, that's what we saw across the country as well playing out, which is that voters really did care about this sense of election denialism and this idea that these candidates would do something so unfair as to just try to overturn an election and overturn the will of the voters. It went against the very core values that Americans believe in, and they really paired it with other extremism that we were seeing candidates push across the country. So extremism on abortion bans, extremism on book banning, extremism around LGBTQ attacks. It was this sense of like, okay, I don't love the Democrats and I'm upset about inflation and economic costs, but these guys over here, look at what they're doing. Like, that is not okay. And that was the choice that really played out across the country. And so I think, Ben, you're exactly right. It was good that contrast was there and that we made sure voters knew about it. We have to continue to make sure voters know about it, because those threats to our elections, the election denialism, I don't think that's going away. We still have a GOP caucus in Congress where more than half of them voted to overturn the 2020 election, right? This idea of the big lie just going away isn't going to happen. Now, thankfully, we have put people and champions in place, Secretary of State candidates in Michigan and Arizona and Nevada and across the state, who are going to defend the voters and defend the certification of elections. But we saw just in the last couple of weeks, certain counties trying to deny certification of elections. So we haven't completely knocked this out. We have to continue to beat them at the ballot box to make sure that we do knock that out completely. But I think that that's what we're seeing.
That leads right into my next question. I was looking back on this past cycle, but looking to 2024, what tactics do you think the right wing is really going to double down on? What lessons are they taking from this election, and what should we be thinking about going into 2024?
Well, you would hope that after being handed their worst midterm performance ever, that what they would do is step back and say, oh, how does what we are saying not align with where the voters are at, and let's take an autopsy on that. But sadly, I don't think that's what we're going to see, right? So instead, I think that you're going to see continued running to the right and to the extremism. Even in the runoff in Georgia, what we're continuing to see are attacks on elections, attacks on voters, attacks on the LGBTQ community, pushing for abortion bans, pushing for book banning, these culture wars that frankly many voters don't want to have anything to do with, and that it goes against their very sense of who we are as Americans and our democracy. I think we're going to continue to see that. The other thing we saw was across the country, we saw really fringe candidates being upheld by dark money. They were only competitive in some of these races because they had all this outside special interest dark money that was propping them up. You know, folks like Blake Masters in Arizona or Don Bolduc in New Hampshire, or to your point, right, like how much Ron Johnson's dark money came in to save him. So the people were with the Democratic candidates. The people were with Mandela Barnes. The people were with Maggie Hassan. And had it just been the two candidates running against each other, that would have been a much different scenario. But this dark money and special interest money that was coming in to prop them up allowed them to run these competitive campaigns when really the candidates themselves didn't have to do anything. We're going to continue to see that as well. So we all as a community who care about these things have to continue to double down on supporting the candidates that we all supported in 2022 and that frankly are going to be up in 2024 as well, that we know are going to defend every single day our democracy in office.
Thank you. And What are your sort of biggest takeaways from what the right wing did and are going to continue doing?
So when I look at this election, one of the things that just I can't get out of my mind is that in our neighboring state of Michigan, they won a Supreme Court majority a couple of years ago. And I don't know if folks saw, the Supreme Court had to override a group of kind of election denialists in order to get their ballot initiatives on the ballot to protect abortion rights. And the state Supreme Court helped ensure that they could have a fair maps ballot initiative that actually took effect, and they had fair maps in this election, and Michigan is now a blue trifecta state, which is just extraordinary. Lavora Barnes, their state party chair, had a very good year, and she did amazing, amazing work. Wisconsin, a couple years ago, we had a state Supreme Court race, and a right-wing dark money group led by Karl Rove poured in money in the final week of that election. We lost by 6,000 votes. And because of that, Republicans have a majority in our state Supreme Court, chose these ultra-gerrymandered maps against the will of the electorate. So I think they're going to keep focusing on down-ballot races that have these long-term impacts. And our job is to fight back exactly at that level. And we have a state Supreme Court race coming up on April 4th of 2023. That's for an open seat that will determine the majority on our state Supreme Court. If we win that race, we could do a challenge like Pennsylvania did after they won the state Supreme Court there, declare our maps unconstitutional, get new maps in Wisconsin, and become an actual democracy where as soon as 2024, we could be like Michigan, we could win a blue trifecta. So Leonard Leo, the dark money groups are going to be pouring their attention into these races that have long-term consequences that affect who makes the rules of our democracy. And I think our job is to fight back like everything rides on these races that are far from the spotlight, including, folks, mark your calendars, Wisconsin, April 4th, 2023.
Right. That's very soon. This is not an off year.
I want to follow up on something Ben said there. Leonard Leo isn't running out of money anytime soon either. I don't know if you all saw it, but he just got the largest political donation in the history of our country. It was $1.6 billion. $1.6 billion to build a right-wing conservative network to go into states like Wisconsin, like Arizona, like other places, and fight on this local level to stack school boards and county commissions and Supreme Courts and to fight ballot measures that would expand our democracy. So we know what we're up against, right? We know what that number is, and we know the thing I believe is more powerful than their $1.6 billion check is all of us coming together in community, because we've proven time and time again that is more powerful and that we can win when we do that.
Thank you. So with just a few minutes left, I'd love for each of you to tell all of us in this room, activists, advocates, leaders, what should we be doing looking to 2024? How can we be a part of this critical pro-democracy movement? Tiffany, if you want to start.
Well, you're doing it right now, right? You're showing up, you're being here, you're being in community, you're having these conversations. You are supporting candidates who each and every day are going to bring those values to the offices that they serve in. So first, thank you. You are already doing it. But we need more people, because they are not going to back down. They are going to continue to get more and more money. And the forces that we are facing are really dangerous, right? They have taken us to a precipice, and it feels like we can take a breath after 2022, but it doesn't mean we can quit fighting. We are not safe, right? They are going to continue these anti-democratic attacks because they believe it is the only way that they can achieve power. We know that the way that we can fight back against that is truly by coming together. That what is more powerful than their big dark money or their anti-democratic attacks is all of us joining forces and coming together and supporting candidates who will fight against that, and then going out and getting our friends and family to vote and to register to vote and to be involved in these races. Here's the other thing. All the people that you just helped elect, what was it, 125, right? Congratulations, by the way, that's incredible. Each and every one of them need to continue to hear from you in the coming months and in the coming years about why democracy is so important, and that you need them to continue fighting for it. Because it's really easy when you're here in Congress to just deal with whatever's right in front of you. And so what you have to do is make sure that what stays right in front of them is the concern about democracy, so that they will continue to fight for it each and every day.
Thank you. And just if you want to wrap a message to this group, what should we be doing?
I love that we're all here after the midterm election, because the core lesson, I think, of these last few years is that there are no off years. What happens in Wisconsin on April 4th, there's that date again. What happens in the fall races in places like Virginia, what happens throughout next year, organizing on the ground, advocating on our issues, but also staying engaged in races that Republicans hope you never hear about, it's gonna make all the difference in the world. The right is very strategic because they know that rigging the system is their only path back to power, which means we have to be even more strategic because we have the people power. And if everyone in this room and all the people that we can recruit and all the millions of people who share our values across the country fight back, democracy will not only survive, it's going to thrive this century in America and Israel.
Thank you so much to our panelists. Thank you guys for being here. And we're gonna head off.